Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out this morning. My name is Cristina Mora, and I am the co-director of the Institute of Governmental Studies, along with Professor Eric Schickler in the Political Science Department. I'm in Sociology, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this year's 2025 Undergraduate Diversity and Entrepreneurship Research Symposium. So very excited about today's event. So in the spring of 2021, IGS and the Matsui Center launched a diversity and entrepreneurship initiative with generous funding from the small business growth sector of the Wells Fargo Foundation. Now in our fifth and final year, the goal of the initiative has been to build a diverse cohort of future civic and political leaders who understand the challenges and opportunities facing women and people of color owned small businesses, who are committed to promoting entrepreneurship in diverse communities through public policy, advocacy, and other forms of creative engagement. You know, if you just look at California, and if you just look at the economic growth engine that moves this state, it is undeniable that immigrant communities, communities of color, and women are fueling everything we see around us today. They are seizing new opportunities wherever they can, contributing to communities along the way, and fostering new markets and new modes of growth for all of us. And the question becomes, how can we support these groups? How can we understand these communities and create the infrastructure that they need to succeed? And over the past 5 years, we've trained and mentored 64 diverse, give an applause, 64 we have come through this program. Thanks to the grant funding, we have provided our D&E fellows more than close to $400,000 for housing and living stipends across the years. We've increased Berkeley students' access to and ability to participate in our public service programs and internships through this grant. So it's been an amazing partnership that we have had. Now, many of our D&E fellows have gone on to careers in state and local government and other forms of public service, bringing with them and into these spaces a deeper knowledge about the challenges facing small business owners across the country. They're in state office, they are in law schools, they are in local community development agencies, all carrying with them the determination, the cutting edge research skills, and the critical attention to social justice that a Berkeley education provides. And we're so very proud and so very grateful to have been a small part of their journey. Now look, it is certainly a trying time for many of us. And I think many of us that are in the academy here at Berkeley, teaching folks like you, ask ourselves time and time again, what are we doing? Are we doing enough? Are we focusing on the right places? And I'll be honest, sometimes, some days it's really hard to wake up and find hope. But every day I come onto this campus, my colleagues come onto this campus, and we see students like you who in your walks of life, from all your great diversity, from all the different communities that you stem from, remind me and all of us each and every day that there is so much to look forward to, so much that we are building together. Today you sit here, but tomorrow you will transform the spaces that you touch. And is without a doubt the greatest honor of our careers to help teach and build the future of California through you and through your efforts. And so thank you so much for being here and for the work that you do. It is events like this that are the highlight of our weeks in this time, and that are inspiration for us on the other side to keep working and keep programs like this alive. Now, given that this is the final year of the D&E initiative, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank Jenny Flores, the former head of the Small Business Growth Philanthropy at Wells Fargo, and a Berkeley alum who provided us with the initial inspiration, guidance, access to funding needed to launch this program. So Jenny, can you stand? Jenny is a tremendous leader who is dedicating her professional life to addressing structural inequalities and empowering communities of color by creating greater access to resources and opportunities for wealth building. She has been a critical thought partner and advocate for our D&E initiative over the past few years, and we are deeply grateful for her guidance and support. Since leaving Wells, Jenny has launched several new ventures, including co-founding AMH Catalyst Center, which is dedicated to removing roadblocks for the next generation of high-impact women entrepreneurs and reimagining the way that women entrepreneurs are financed. We wish her so much success in this next initiative of hers, and we're so thankful for her support and generosity and for being with us over the last 5 years. So we have a gift for you.
The flowers are there, but we can keep them in water until you keep some. Thank you, Jenny.
Well, we'll keep them in water. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Christine Trost, Executive Director of IGS.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, everyone. I want to offer a very warm welcome to everyone joining us here in person and also virtually online. We are so glad to have you here today for this amazing day of research created by and shared by our students. I have the pleasure and the privilege of working with these students, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how they got to this point, the work that they've been doing, and also how today's symposium is going to be structured. So as Cristina said, as part of the Diversity and Entrepreneurship Initiative here at Berkeley and at IGS, the students who are featured at today's symposium spent the spring of this past year training in how to develop an original research proposal. They worked independently or in teams of two, conducting a literature review, developing a problem statement. That problem statement then informed a specific research question. Then they identified the type of data that they would need in order to answer that research question and the methods required in order to gather that data. Over the summer, they implemented their research plans, and that involved in many cases recruiting respondents, conducting interviews, coding transcripts, analyzing transcripts and other forms of qualitative and quantitative data. Finally, they translated all of this and their findings and recommendations from this kind of academic work into a language that would be accessible to a general audience in the form of op-eds and policy memos. And starting tomorrow, those will be available for viewing and downloading in the eScholarship repository of the California Digital Library. Needless to say, this was a lot of work. And I also want to note that our D&E fellows undertook all of this work while at the same time completing 8-week public service internships in or alongside state government in Sacramento as part of our Cal in Sacramento program, which trains and nurtures the next generation of public service leaders. Today's symposium includes 2 panels, 75 minutes each, featuring individual and joint presentations by our fellows. In between, we will have a 45-minute break for a catered lunch that I hope everyone will stay for as well. As in past years, all of the research projects and findings presented today shine a spotlight on the challenges and opportunities facing small business owners, diverse entrepreneurs in the Bay Area and California communities. Some of the questions posed by our D&E fellows are rooted in their own lived experiences with the crises, human-made and natural, that are currently impacting California communities. The January 2025 wildfires that not only destroyed homes, but also small businesses and impacted the livelihoods of people who live and work in those areas. Restrictions on immigration and ICE raids that are terrorizing immigrant communities, and the economic distress owners are still trying to recover. So we are grateful to our fellows for making this a particular focus of their research this year and offering new and timely research on these critical areas, in addition to focusing on the barriers and opportunities that small business entrepreneurs face in California. Now, one goal of the Diversity and Entrepreneurship Fellowship Program is to connect our students and their research to people who work on these issues and who are experts in the field. So in addition to our students presenting their research, we are also going to give them a chance to receive feedback on their work from knowledgeable experts in the field. And with this in mind, we're going to be hearing from distinguished respondents who will offer an initial round of feedback after the presentations. And then we will open things up to invite questions from you in the audience, in person and online. And if you're participating online, please add your questions to the chat and the panel's moderator will ask them for you. Following the symposium, we're going to host a reception here, if it's not nice in the courtyard, but hopefully in the courtyard if we have good weather. And I hope many of you will stay on to continue the conversations that are going to be started on these panels. I just also want to note that all of the food that we are serving today is from local women, women of color, or POC-owned small businesses here in the Bay Area. So last but not least, before we begin, I just want to say a few thank yous and recognize some of the people who have played a really central role in training and mentoring our D&E fellows and in organizing today's event. I want to start with Adriana Ramirez, who's in the back. Adriana is a PhD student in sociology. She's going to be moderating today's second panel. And throughout the spring and summer, she provided outstanding hands-on training and mentorship and guidance and encouragement to our fellows as they develop their research proposals. And then over the summer, she continued to accompany them in the implementation of those projects. And she is just an extraordinary teacher and mentor. And I could not be more grateful, Adriana, to you for all that you provided to our students and also to me over the past year. So thank you, Adriana. Each Diversity and Entrepreneurship Fellow also received a mentor. And many of them are Cal alums. All of them are leaders in the field of business, education, or policymaking. And I'd like to invite any of the mentors who are joining us in person or virtually today to please stand or raise your virtual hand as I name them. Linda Young, Karina Monzon, Eric Firth, Fatima Martinez-Jara, Peter Brightbill, Emily Martinez-Ramirez, Helen Fun, Varsa Sarveshwar, Jennifer Serrano, Anita Garcia, and also Jenny Flores, who is also mentioned in the past fellows too. Thank you all for sharing your time and advice and wisdom with our students. I also want to thank IGS staff, Ezra Bristow, Mary Watson, Reuben, for helping to coordinate and manage many of the details involved in hosting this type of event, along with our amazing student assistants, Amina Pope, Julian Vargas, and Star Avila. Finally, I want to thank our Diversity and Entrepreneurship Fellows who took on the challenges of doing original research, which is not easy, who took on the challenge of doing research on critical topics of importance to our communities, our state, and our nation. For many of our fellows, this was the first time they'd ever done original research or implemented an original research project or drafted a publication for a general audience or give an academic presentation to a live audience. So I just want to thank you for pushing yourselves and doing all of this incredible work, and today sharing what you've learned and your recommendations to a much broader audience. Thank you for pushing yourselves to learn and to grow. It has been an absolute honor working with all of you, and to share your commitment to this work and bringing greater awareness and equity and action to these issues that need to be addressed. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel, Overcoming Barriers and Building Power Strategies for Increasing Women and Immigrant Entrepreneurs' Access to Capital, Information, and Mentorship, and the Difference This Makes. The first three presentations that you'll be hearing from include focusing on barriers such as gender, immigration status, language access, and information gaps that impact an entrepreneur's ability to access the capital needed to launch and sustain a small business, along with strategies and recommendations for how to overcome these barriers. Our last presentation provides insight into the important role that community development financial institutions, otherwise known as CDFIs, can play not only in helping entrepreneurs overcome these barriers, but in laying the groundwork for civic engagement and empowerment. So with that, our first presentation, Identifying Access to Capital Issues Amongst Immigrant Small Business Owners, will be presented by Shakti, Rajwani, and Joshua de Miguel. I'd love to invite you forward as I introduce you. So Shakti is an international student from Singapore. After completing his military service, he moved to Washington State, where he became involved in community service initiatives such as the Tiny Homes Project, building small homes from Seattle's homeless population, and volunteering as an ESL tutor for refugees. A transfer student from Green River College, Shakti is now a senior majoring in political science, and he spent the summer interning with the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Joshua is a first-generation transfer student who is interested in public service, which was sparked by his family and his mom's work as an EMT. His interests include housing and labor rights, and he served as chief of staff to the ASUC transfer representative and is hall safety ambassador for the university's housing rights organization. Now a senior, Joshua is majoring in political science with a minor in public policy. And this past summer, Joshua interned with the legal division of California's Department of Housing and Community Development.
Hi, everybody. Welcome again. My name is Joshua, and this is
I'm Shakti Rajwani.
and our presentation is focusing on identifying access to capital issues amongst immigrant small business owners, specifically in the Sacramento area.
So just for some background before we start. So the reason we kind of picked this was because California is the fourth largest economy in the world, which is, people don't know this, but California is a very huge economy. There are about almost 900,000 immigrants that are in own businesses here in the state of California. Immigrants pay up to $170 billion worth of taxes just in the state of California, which supersedes any other state by a large number. And the most amount of Fortune 500 companies are founded here in the state of California. Yet they do still face issues like access to barrier, systemic issues such as discrimination in obtaining loans, all sorts of different kind of access to capital issues. So we thought this would be really kind of a cool project to start delving our research into.
Cool. So just going into the broader research question. So the question is, what factors contribute to disparities in access to capital for specifically Hispanic and Indian immigrant small business owners in Sacramento, and what solutions can address these gaps? And over this presentation, we're going to go over why this matters. And first, we're going to introduce a bit of our background and why this is important to us.
So like I said, this is a project that not just means a lot to the state of California, but also means a lot to us. So, being an international student, being able to do some research in Sacramento, seeing how large the immigrant population and community is there, especially in entrepreneurship, kind of, tapped into my kind of resonance with that city because, if any of you have been to Sacramento, it's a very, very, very immigrant-friendly city. A lot of small businesses are run by immigrants. So we thought that kind of using that melting pot of cultures there and being able to dive our research with it provided us like, a comprehensive understanding of what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, specifically for myself, my city has a very strong emphasis of support for small businesses. My family has a small business that a janitor service that I grew up working for. So this was particularly interesting to me because I was familiar with how it works at a city level, but I was curious how the state largely can support us. Also, as someone from a Latina background, I felt that this is something very prominent, specifically in my community. So I wanted to help out. Yeah, so we're going to go a little bit into the data and methods we used. So the sources, we structured interviews with 6 immigrant-owned business owners, so 3 Hispanic, 3 Indian, in grocery and restaurant sectors. I really want to highlight that the original goal was 10, but as we went about our summer, we realized this was a lot harder than we realized, for the reason that a lot of them felt very uncomfortable just giving their information out. We did tell them that their data and identity is protected, but regardless, there's still a very strong hesitancy. So that's something we wanted to highlight. Additionally, we used analysis of program websites, academic studies, legislation, and local recent reports. And methods were qualitative coding for interview transcripts for current themes, and comparative analysis with broader statewide and national data on lending program access and demographic trends, which we'll cover in our later slides.
Just to quickly add on to this, so our research was largely conducted during a period where ICE immigration raids were, commonplace in the state. I mean, it's still there now, but it was probably rampant at the time. So that's why there was that kind of air of uncertainty amongst people we're interviewing. That's why we didn't really have that many people who were willing to do this. But regardless, we did what we could. And just based off our initial analysis, the first kind of key finding we had is that there are systemic lending discriminations faced by immigrant entrepreneurs. So the average loan size based on research for Latino-owned firms is about $47,000, but it's $34,000 less than non-Latino firms. Primarily white-owned businesses do get about close to $100,000 worth of loans versus which is like about half of what double of what Latino owners get. And many Latino and immigrant owners have reported multiple bank rejections in terms of personal, saving, and family loans. And what that actually does is that it creates a kind of system of predatory loan programs for these people. So people will go back, let's say, for example, if an immigrant business owner is from Mexico and they can't get funding here, what they'll do is they'll try to get funding from back home. And that leads to interest rates of north of 20%. Which is significantly higher than what an average bank would give out an interest rate for. So that was one of kind of the key issues we faced. Whereas Indian immigrant entrepreneurs, based on our initial analysis and interviews, reported about three plus months of paperwork for SBA or Small Business Association loans, often ending in rejection. So what this means is that they would go through the entire bureaucratic process of getting paperwork done, getting everything they needed done, only to get rejected. So that's time wasted, effort wasted to get nothing. So that was kind of the first issue we faced. There's a quote by one of the people we interviewed that is very long, so I just want to skim over it. Kind of showed the disdain that a business owner would have faced during facing this challenge.
Cool. So now we're going to the second key finding, which is resource awareness and information access gap. So the first point being local entrepreneurs were largely unaware of critical resources. So as you can see in this quote and also the previous one, there is knowledge of these programs, but it's primarily seeking guidance. There's no hands-on access to these reps, or if there is, then it's very hard and you really only get one shot at this kind of thing. So we listed a couple of programs that were prominent that they were aware of. The second point is reliance on community networks rather than official channels. Again, Shakti went over the predatory loan sharks, but also just if you don't know the resources from community members, then you're likely not going to get that information from official channels such as these different funding pools. And the last point would be multilingual access is limited, especially for South Asian languages. It is something that we want to see. We'll talk about this in the later slide, but we want to see more of because it's a largely easy fix, especially on the websites. It's just not being done.
Just to kind of quickly add on to what Joshua said. So these 4 programs you see, CalCat, SBDC, iBank, and CDFIs, I did some cross-reference with the GoBiz department to see what kind of issues consumers may still face. And they literally said the exact same things in our findings is there's not enough information on these things. And when there is information, people don't know how to navigate these different kind of programs. And even if they find the resources to help navigate these process, it's always kind of not really a walkthrough, a personalized kind of guidance. It's more of a generic kind of information dump on them, which is, overwhelming, especially if English is not your first language. Because out of these 4 resources, which is just 4 out of a plethora of them, only iBank offers comprehensive language access for all these different programs. The rest of them only offer it in very basic Spanish and primarily English, which is not very user-friendly for users as well. And then the final issue, which is, again, kind of a trivial issue, which needs to be addressed, but is not addressed, website and information currency issues. So, program sites like CalCap, which is the California Capital Access Program, and iBank, which is another loan service providing program, they kind of lack that multilingual material revealed, which reveal technical problems and, outdated kind of resources. So if you guys, I encourage all of you guys to go to their website, look at how to get small business support. You will quickly get very lost very fast. There is so much information that's kind of all over the place. Trying to find something that you need will take time and effort, especially if English is not your first language. And then for CalCap, which is like I said, the Capital Access Program, there are only 19 lenders, and the top 3 lenders kind of look after 81% of volume, which is a significant disproportion of kind of weight put on these different programs. Some specialized programs for small business assistance are now closed to new enrollment, so which is not good. With recent federal funding cuts in federal funding, there has been issues with kind of getting that capital to provide for small businesses. So that's just added another layer of kind of difficulty for these small business owners. And many state programs do, like I said, lack the multilingual resources. CalOSBA, which is the Office of Small Business Advocate, which is probably the first touch point a lot of small business owners would use, offers very limited Spanish and no South Asian language support at all. So in California, your Vietnamese, your Thai, your Burmese, any South Asian languages or South Asian entrepreneurs have no way to access these resources without that language help. And again, you can see from the quote, again, disdain from one of the Indian business owners we interviewed. Again, they said that every time they use the portal, it crashed. Don't blame them. We've tried doing it ourselves, and it's just very, very hard to access. So there are certain issues that we think kind of providing that initial access and barriers to these access to capital for these owners.
Cool. So we're going to move on to recommendations. This is specifically to the state, and we have sort of a timeline. Starting now, we think the state should launch targeted outreach via cultural liaisons and chambers. There are, a smaller network in Sacramento. A lot of these business owners do know each other, so word of mouth is very easy to circulate. At the 3-month period, we're thinking if we standardize translation materials over all state-owned websites. Example is iBank. This is very feasible and it shouldn't take that long. Very, very easy fix. At the 6-month period, we want to introduce trained business navigator roles in SBDCs and CDFIs. And at 9 months, which is long-term, we want to enhance digital accessibility. So going back to the websites, it's not just language, but it's also just navigating in general. Once you do these applications, you're kind of like, well, when am I going to get reached out to? What are the next steps? It's all, unless you know somebody that went through the process themselves, you're going to be sort of just stuck. And last to the 12-month period, we want to strengthen and build on the 114 CDFI partnerships with ethnic chambers and develop industry-specific programs. So this is adding on to the previous points. And then long-term, just looking into the near future, we want to reform the application processes as a whole, standardize the forms and enable real-time tracking where they're able to keep track of what the status of the different applications are.
Right. And again, just like what Josh said, a lot of these things should and can be done by the state, which always involves grassroots efforts, even efforts from us students. So for most of the immediate steps, that actually can be done by students, especially students who are interested in like the Town Sacramento program, students that get involved with public service. When I was doing my internship with GoBiz, I was actually tasked with helping launch targeted outreach to different kind of legal associations like Public Counsel, the National Immigration Law Center, all these different kind of programs. So immediate steps can be done by students at the state level, whereas more long-term kind of solutions will have to be done by the state or even require some sort of federal intervention, which could be hard to do. But again, being able to lobby and kind of contribute to grassroots advocacy efforts can help at least hasten the process of getting these things done, because it's very comprehensive, but it is definitely achievable if we kind of create a structured plan kind of targeting the different sort of solutions we want to address. If not, thank you so much for your
Okay, our next presentation, Navigating Barriers, Struggles and Strategies of Immigrant Women Entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, is by Jishan Jiang. Come on up. Jishan is a senior double majoring in data science and legal studies with a minor in education. She's passionate about the intersection between policy, technology, and educational equity. She aspires to be both an educator and researcher, and is especially passionate about designing curricula and educational policies that prioritize marginalized or underrepresented students' experiences. She spent the summer interning with the California Department of Education's executive team. Please join me in welcoming Jishan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jishan, a senior majoring in legal studies and data science double with a minor in education. Today I'm sharing my finding from my qualitative study over the summer. It's called Navigating Barriers, Struggles and Strategies of Immigrant Women Entrepreneurs in the Bay Area. As an international student, as a woman in STEM, I see firsthand how immigration barriers and challenges and bias can just limit opportunities for those who are so capable. That's why I'm researching how these entrepreneurs, they find ways to push through, building partnerships, tapping into specialized ventures, and leaning into their cultural identities. By telling their stories, I hope to show how the system needs to change and how creating a fair business environment ecosystem benefits everyone. So I wanted to start by providing some background. Immigrant-founded business was proven to be very effective in powering the innovation economy and creating jobs. Data shows that immigrant-founded business has a 42% higher than native-born forms in job opportunities. However, immigration women face a double bind. There's rules of visa restrictions that cut out their timing, and there's investor bias that they encounter, both from their cultural identity, but also their gender identity. In the Bay Area, those frictions show up in very practical terms, like timesheets, hiring, or even in the coffee chat norms. For them, launching a business isn't just tricky, it's stacked against them from the very beginning. So I hope to add their stories from those foreign-born women entrepreneurs to move beyond statistics and into real-life accounts. So I wanted to provide two quick key concepts. The first one is called International Entrepreneur Rule, IER. It is something that can grant temporary permission for founders, but often hinges on investment threshold and networks that many women entrepreneurs, especially at the very beginning of their business, they just haven't yet had that yet. And second is research on venture capital pitch dynamics find that women are more often asked prevention-focused questions about risk, while in the same way, men often get promotion-focused questions on business growth. So with that context, my research question is, what strategies do immigrant women entrepreneurs in the Bay Area use to counter financial and investment challenges when founding a startup? Over the summer, I conducted 4 semi-structured interviews from May to July 2025 with immigrant women entrepreneurs across different sectors like educational tech, food service, and retail, like florists in the Bay Area, each about 60 to 90 minutes, recorded with consent and semantically coded. This is a snapshot of my qualitative coding. It's done in an inductive coding scheme, and I identified some codes while I witnessed what are some emerging themes from the interviews. For instance, visa constraints. It's always something they bring up the first. There's also investor bias and gender. There's cultural bias. They are trying to find ways to get their funding. How do they strategize? Networking. They also talk about self-representation and positionality. and also cultural networking and how their motivation have been so mission-driven. So my first finding, as I just said, is visa timing. Visa status functions as a clock that shortens founders' risk window. My first participant, Emily, told me she's an educational startup owner. She said, if I leave my H-1B work visa to build my startup, my company cannot sponsor me anymore. I'd have to leave the US right away. I only launched after my green card came through. She launched at the age of 35, an age that she felt some investors read as late, especially compared to younger visa founders without visa concerns. Mia, who's on an F1 student visa, describes her startup. She works in global education consulting and advising as merely a side project to stay compliant. That label increases the uncertainties to investors around payroll, hiring, and long-term presence. Visa rules delay launch and compress the period when the investor expects speed, risk-taking, and rapid action. So my second finding is in the hidden bias and even explicit bias around gendered and cultural expectations in the rooms. Fundraising conversations are gendered and culturally coded. From co-ethnic investors, my interviewee, Emily, fielded questions like, you are a solo founder. Are you married? Do you plan to have kids? How can you run a startup and raise a family at the same time? And you didn't graduate from a top school. Find a partner. US investors rarely ask about her personal life, but she did notice a pattern. They focus on traction and market fit, and then quickly just decline. Meanwhile, I watched male founders with far less experience get warmer follow-ups. In the realm of food service and restaurants, Susan, who owns a Chinese restaurant, encountered a different type of stereotype. Her cuisine was treated as a niche ethnic product, and she reframed it as a scalable cultural experience, hosted tea and talk sessions, and converted local bloggers and influencers into repeat customers and advocates for her. Finding 3 is about how do people find workarounds, bootstrapping niche partnerships, and affinity networks. Founders rather blocked VC channels with 3 different moves. First, they tried bootstrapping and making revenue loops. Emily persisted with a skeptical school principal who initially called her educational model only for failures. She calmly sent monthly outcome updates, and a year later, that same principal signed a pilot contract with her. Second, it's niche partnerships. So Linda, a florist, she channeled community advocacy after an anti-Asian event. She lives in Oakland, Chinatown. Linda told me that activism literally filled my shop. And Susan's tastings turned bloggers and influencers into a durable referral network. So speaking of affinity network, Mia noted that she didn't want to have a one-size-fits-all persona that's not herself. She found women founders and also international student circles where they are willing to mentor her, and investors actually understood the importance and her brilliance in cross-border markets. She contrasted that with general pitch events and coffee chats and said, coffee chats for me just felt performative and demotivating. Across cases, the shared logic is evidence first. Demonstrate value with pilots, customers, and outcomes. So to synthesize the fundings, we realize that visa timing always pushes launch later, sometimes into an age range that draws tougher scrutiny. Gendered and cultural scripts shape question and answer sessions, making a maybe even harder to earn. The strategies that work best generated undeniable proof, contracts, repeat customers, and public advocacy, and targeted a aligned audience who could recognize that proof. So some recommendations we gathered throughout the interviews and throughout the kind sharings of our participants is policy-wise, if there could be a startup visa pathway, that would be amazing. It'll reduce a lot of launch latency for qualified founders. Also, diversify decision makers in VC and accelerators. Use structured Q&A to curb prevention-only questions for women. Also, building a mentorship-first incubator that replace like DEC boot camps with targeted customer interactions. And in practice, one of my interviewees, Emily, noted that it's really helpful to send regular evidence memos, brief outcome updates to warm up those skeptics, and also log investor questions. If a room repeatedly asks only risk containment questions, prioritize other spaces where your market, your mission, you are legible and respected. So in conclusion, when visa clogs and bias gatekeeping collide, we do waste a lot of amazing founders' prime building times. The woman in the study offers a great playbook, evidence-driven pilots, community-rooted demand, and aligned networks that turns a no into a yes and into a momentum. So thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lara Zangana. The title of her presentation is Launching Forward Startup Realities for Women of Color from UC Berkeley. Lara is a first-generation college student, double majoring in society and the environment and conservation and resource studies. Now a senior, she has a strong passion for developing equitable business practices, innovative energy solutions, and cutting-edge technology. She also has an unwavering commitment to social justice and environmental stewardship, and she spent the fall 2024 semester interning with the White House Office of Science, Technology, and Policy, where she served as a policy intern advancing clean energy solutions. This past summer, she interned with the Office of California State Senator Jose Padilla.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lara. I'm a senior. As Christine mentioned, I'm studying Society and Environment and Conservation and Resource Studies. And as a part of my Cal Sacramento Fellowship and D&E Fellowship, I explored the challenges that women of color face when entering the startup space, and I focused on current Berkeley students and alum within 5 years. So background is, this topic matters to me because women are historically underrepresented within the business space, and only 2% of VC funding goes to women founders and even less to women of color. This is a significantly low number and already shows a key barrier into entering the space. Personal investment in supporting inclusive innovation is so important if we want to keep Berkeley globally known within the startup space. And as a woman of color myself, this is so meaningful to me because I want to make sure that I'm properly uplifting these communities and women. So as I briefly mentioned, I'm exploring the challenges and advantages women of color face when entering the startup space. Recent alum within 5 years or current students were included in my interviews. As for methods and data, I did 3 semi-structured interviews with one current student founder who's the CEO of a social app for collecting opinions. And I did one recent alumni who's a former chief operations officer of a biotech company. And my last interview was the founder and CEO of a travel app. And I did outreach to over 10 plus startup founders, but these women are so overworked, juggling multiple jobs, their own startup, and they can't afford to drop out of school like many of their male colleagues. So outreach was very difficult in the sense that not only are there not enough women in this space, but they're extremely overbooked, and rescheduling was a challenge despite them wanting to put in the work. Each interview was over 30 minutes, recorded and transcribed, and I divided it into categories of challenges, support, identity, funding, and Berkeley-specific insights. So my key finding for number 1 was sorry, can you see my slides? Is that there was a lot of passion, but not enough support. All 3 women mentioned that they started this as a passion project, but they had no role model or mentors in this space. Their community projects turned into a startup, and they're working on their own to navigate the space and get funding. Founder and CEO of a social app at UC Berkeley stated, it was initially a passion project, but I turned it into a mini startup to get exposure. Another interview said, I started it because I saw a real need in my community, founder and CEO of a travel app. The takeaway is motivation is high, but structured support and guidance are lacking early on. All interviewees mentioned having no role models within their family or here at Berkeley, within their professors, or even clubs that they could find community in. So there's a really lack of representation for these women of color and uplifting them. My second key finding was that there's a lot of funding and technical gaps, which is a huge barrier. As I mentioned, only 2% of VC funding goes to women, and even less goes to women of color. It's a very male-dominated space, and women are oftentimes overlooked when entering conferences or even campus spaces on Berkeley, where they were told that their ideas weren't as serious or that they can't do this alone. One interviewee said, "I have so many ideas I want to implement, but I can't do it alone," founder and CEO of a travel app. I just remember getting laughed at because I wasn't building something serious like AI. A founder and CEO of a social app she stated that she was here on campus and her male colleague just laughed at her face and said, "You can't do this alone, you have no connections." And their male colleague was able to drop out because they financially had the resources and connections, but she came from a background where she was first gen and could not afford to drop out of school. So my key takeaway is there's lots of technical and financial barriers, and women need to be uplifted financially and also educationally, making sure that they have the technical skills they need to successfully pursue their startup. My third key finding was that there are resources, but they're not designed for women of color in mind. Haas here is great, it's globally known, and Berkeley is #1, and it came out #1 again in 2025 for, yes, #1 public university, but also #1 in startup founders. But why don't we see enough women in this space? There's no specific community for women of color founders, despite us having almost 1,000 clubs on campus. So there's a lack of visibility for women of color as they have no role models. Representation is so important, and these women deserve to have mentors and people who can support them on campus and beyond. And as I mentioned, a former CEO of a biotech startup mentioned there's no network or community just for women of color in startups. And then all three interviewees quoted this, which really stood out to me. And they said, maybe the resources exist, but they're not marketed to us. As they would get emails, as they were searching, they would see resources that were very general and broad, but there was nothing specifically when it came to funding or clubs targeted at women of color to help them pursue their startup passions. So resources exist, but they're not targeted to women. And there's a lot of gender bias in this space, as all interviewees mentioned that when they would be on campus within the different clubs and even Berkeley Skydeck, they were questioned as to what their future plan was, if they were planning on having kids or not, because their founders didn't want them to be too emotionally attached to other commitments in their life. And they also were often underestimated in the sense that they were automatically viewed as not worthy to be in this space or not aware of the startup lingo. Key finding #4 is experience, confidence, and perception shape the experience of all these women of color. Participants noted that being a person of color, specifically a woman, shaped how they were perceived and treated. They faced a lot of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, but continued on regardless. People just underestimate you sometimes, or they don't take you seriously. Former chief operations officer of a biotech company. Every time I open LinkedIn, I only see male founders are raising millions. And she mentioned to me how when she is in the spaces on campus, only time people would want to work with women is particularly women of colors if they had a male co-founder. And so this was already a difficult barrier for women who wanted to be solo CEOs and start up their journey. So we often carry the emotional labor of navigating the spaces where they feel invisible or incapable as a woman of color, despite Berkeley, again, being #1 within the startup space and founders year and year again. Conclusions and takeaways. Berkeley startup culture continues to underserve women of color, and as a result, talent and innovation will be lost. Research shows that compared to men, a woman hosts and creates social impact projects a lot more within the startup space, so this impacts community growth. And if Berkeley were to invest in these women, not only would we have a more equitably and just society, but Berkeley can expand its reputation even more, which is something that I know is so important to the university. But equitable startup support fosters not just inclusion, but better outcomes for the entire ecosystem. So overall, passion and drive are extremely strong. All of these women were so ambitious and exciting to talk to. I'm so inspired by them, but structural barriers persist. These women deserve to have specific niche spaces for them on campus, and I'm excited to see how this can change and Berkeley can support these women more. So recommendations and call to action. As I said, there needs to be a network specifically for women of color, startup founders, for them to have a space to connect and grow together. Also, improving visibility and outreach is super important with the current resources that exist, whether that be through HOS, Berkeley Skydeck, or Entrepreneurship Center. For future research, larger sample of founders across race, gender, and major would be amazing. I know that a lot of professors that I talked to referred me to people, but they didn't fit my criteria. One of my entrepreneurship professors specifically said, no one comes to mind within my criteria of a woman of color within 5 years as a recent alum or a current student. Keep in mind, my professor has lectures where we have people come in to speak to us who are former students. So there was a lot of men and non-POC in the space, but I couldn't speak to them or use them for my research as they did not fill the criteria. So there's a large gap in this space, which needs to be changed. And this would be a great study with male founders at Berkeley, and also emphasizing funding and grants for women. These women often juggle working full-time and multiple jobs. And like I said, they can't afford to drop out. So it's really important that Berkeley has these financial resources in place for them. For the audience, support your peer startups, get involved, show up, amplify, invest, and collaborate with these women because their ideas are so important and they deserve to have a community and have their voices uplifted here. Acknowledgements. Thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful to be a part of the D&E Fellowship. Thank you so much to Wells Fargo for this amazing opportunity. All of the IGS staff, I'm so grateful for this experience within the summer and just being a CalSAC fellow. Thank you to my CalSAC mentor, who's also here today. Shout out, Jennifer. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being the older sister that I never had. I just appreciate you so much, and it's great having someone who's once in my shoes. Last but not least, my family and friends, thank you so much. As a woman of color myself, I'm so honored to be doing this research and hopefully creating a space for these women here at Berkeley. Thank you so much. A heartfelt thank you.
Good job.
Okay, our final presentation is from Emily Chamale Hernandez. Beyond Capital, How CDFIs and Mentorship Fuel Civic Power Among Latinx-Owned Small Businesses in LA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Emily Chamale, and I'm a fourth-year double major in political science and ethnic studies. And I'm really excited to talk about my research because I'm specifically focusing in South LA. Where I grew up. So I'm analyzing in my research how CDFI, community development, financial institutions, and mentorship fuel civic engagement among Latinx-owned small businesses in LA. So a little background about my research. When I was constructing my research question, I came across this map right here, as you guys can see. We have the green map that showcases how in the broader Central and South LA area, there is a lack of loans under 100K for small business owners. And then on the other side, we have more CDFI business loans agreed to small businesses. So you guys can see there's a correlation between a lack of traditional bank loans, and then on the other side we have more CDFIs. As someone who grew up in South LA, I wanted to give back to my community, and so I wanted to analyze how civic engagement plays a role in CDFIs. And so I briefly wanted to touch about what are CDFIs. So the CDFIs were established under the 1994 Community Development and Regulatory Improvement Act under the Reagan administration, and they are specifically enacted to support economic opportunity to underserved communities like South LA. They're mission-driven lenders, and they look very different around the spectrum. They could come as nonprofits, they could look like credit unions, they could look like community banks, and their main focus is inclusion. So the main CDFIs that I was working with were Vermont's Lawson and Inclusive Action for the city. So my research question consisted of how has CDFI funding and mentorship over the past 5 to 10 years influenced the political awareness of POC owners, businesses in South Los Angeles. My methodology was interviewing 4 POC small businesses. 2 were from South LA and 2 were from the broader LA area. They all received CDI funding and 3 of them received mentorship. Throughout my interviews, I was focusing on their civic engagement before CDFI support and after CDFI support. So that's how I was able to measure how they were being politically engaged in their communities. These interviews lasted up to 40 to 60 minutes and they were recorded and they were transcribed. I was also focusing on their policy awareness, how financial mentorship has shaped their confidence and leadership and advocacy. My overall key finding was that CDFIs provide critical funding and mentorship, which can also transform not only businesses' outcome, but also civic awareness and leadership. My first finding persisted of, although there is funding allocated to these small business owners, there's still structural barriers, such as like their immigration status, language barriers, fear of retaliations, and the overall lack of invitation to civic spaces. For example, one of my participants, Mario, said, I don't have the knowledge, someone to get me involved because you always need a bit of a push. It's like let go with this person. Nicholas and the others was saying there are still people like us who are in the process of waiting for something to happen. For example, receiving a work permit or residency. We are people who might now are in the limbo because we could not raise our voices yet. We feel that we do not yet have that right. A lot of my participants were undocumented and unfortunately had this perspective that in order for you to become civically engaged, you had to be a citizen or have some sort of status. A lot of them lack just this overall invitation to civic spaces. My second finding consisted of the mentorship also serve as a catalyst to boosting their confidence in leadership and visibility, in helping entrepreneurs build more from isolation to public speaking and collaborating with other small business owners. Right here we have Fernanda saying, back then I used to be really shy. I wouldn't even talk. Growing up has been hard for us, but not anymore. Like now I'm nice and I want to keep going. And so this mentorship of CDFIs has been such a critical component to them becoming more involved with other small business owners. And they were also saying, like, if you want it, you have to talk bread. I have to talk for the first time and tell my story. My third finding consisted that although there is an increased awareness, there's a limited empowerment. And so my last question that I asked for them is, on a scale 1 to 5, how do you feel that the CDFI that you have been involved with help you become more civically engaged? And the 4 of them said that they all felt on a scale 4 to 5, which is very high. Participants said that it boosted their civic awareness, but again, it was that lack of invitation that they felt limited their political engagement. From this section, I really just want to highlight that this participant was saying how there were involved, their valid parking services were involved with working for the city, working for campaigns and private events at their homes. But there was just, if they had the opportunity to get involved, they would want to. My overall conclusion consisted that these CDFIs are providing just them loans. They're also planting the seeds for civic empowerment, and especially with everything that's going on right now, I realized that that this is more just that than beyond capital. It's also investing in their political life, and when paired with mentorship and culturally relevant civic support, they could also help Latinx or just new entrepreneurs in general to serve not only survive as new business owners, but also grow into visible civic leaders. My fourth recommendation of this consisted of developing a program within the CDFI, focusing on the civic empowerment fellowship, essentially training entrepreneurs in how to do public speaking, policy literacy, and local advocacy, ultimately executing these skills, either going through a city council session or visits in Sacramento and talking to the legislators. My second recommendation consisted of creating multilingual immigration inclusive political engagement. Again, a lot of them felt that because they didn't know English, English, they think that they didn't have the right to speak up. And so my recommendations is launching a pilot program titled Business Voices that partners with official Office of Immigrant Affairs and Inclusive Action, one of the CDFIs, to host quarterly listening sessions within the city department, conducted in Spanish and other relevant languages. And that's it.
Thank you, Emily. I also want to add that Emily is a first-generation student who is double majoring in political science and ethnic studies. And as she mentioned, she grew up in South LA and observed there the inadequate resources her community received. And so she's really committed herself to addressing that inequity and hopes to serve her hometown, whether as a grassroots organizer or policymaker focused not only on tackling immediate needs, but establishing a foundation for long-term prosperity. And I think your research really reflects that. So thank you, Emily. She also interned over the summer with the California Department of Education's Legal Affairs Division. Okay, now I would like to invite forward our respondent, Jenny Flores, who was introduced a little bit earlier, but I want to say a little bit more while you come up, Jenny. So as Cristina mentioned, Jenny is a Berkeley alum. She served as head of small business growth philanthropy at Wells Fargo, where she created and led the company's $400 million Open for Business Fund, which supported immediate and long-term needs of small businesses impacted by COVID-19. Before Wells, she was head of corporate social responsibility at Bank of the West, where she spearheaded the company's small business engagement environmental sustainability strategies. Her accomplishments there include launching a $30 million investment fund with community development financial institutions and developing a $1 billion commitment to renewable and clean energy. She also spent a decade in community development at Citigroup and held leadership roles at the Congress of California Seniors, the Green Lining Institute, and the California State Legislature. In 2024, she left Wells Fargo to co-found and currently serve as the CEO of the AMH Catalyst Center, an innovative hub that leverages technology to build a more inclusive venture capital ecosystem. With more than 2 decades of of leadership in banking, business, and social impact, she's built a career at the intersection of capital, innovation, and community, and she is the perfect respondent for this panel. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jenny Flores.
Well, thank you, everybody. I loved every single one of the presentations. I literally eat, sleep, and dream about more accessible capital. So I was absorbing everything that you said. And one of the things that struck me about the presentations this year, and I think seen all of them, Christine, is that we really focused on the systemic level, deeper systemic barriers, as well as we came out of just the debt side and went into the venture capital world, which has never surfaced for the students that were doing research. And I will say that it gave me a great pleasure to see the thinking expanding. I have this pen that wants to fall down. Thinking expanding around the capital stack, right? There are grants you can get, the debt side, you can go into equity, commercial. And it's very exciting that this is already on your radar as students, because it allows you to jump into your professional roles as you graduate with so much knowledge about how the system works. And so for me, the systemic approach, where you're literally in the engineering of how things are connected or disconnected, is super powerful. And I really appreciated that lens on each of the presentations. So what I'm going to do, I will respond with that lens as well. And I will start my feedback in the order in which the presentations were delivered. So my first feedback points for Joshua and Shakti, I really enjoyed the fact that you were comparing Latino and Indian immigrants and really showing that the structural barriers can impact any community that's underserved, right? And so that was really powerful. I like that it was grounded in the interviews and that you also did a program and policy analysis around some of the major infrastructure that sits in California to support entrepreneurs. And basically what you're saying is that they're missing the target. They're not going deep enough in our communities. And then I really enjoyed the fact that you were finding clear evidence of the barriers and the lack of awareness, and the fact that interviewing people validated that they don't, like, they try to get the information and it's just either too confusing or absent. One thing I will highlight in terms of the discrepancy of loans that you said, like we get less loans, we get declined more, is this factor that it's for similarly situated businesses. So you could be comparing a company with the same FICO score, the same revenue, the same industry. And when you layer the race or sometimes the gender, lower loan amounts, declines are higher. So it's not a function of performance. There's something happening, right? That is easy for us to pinpoint when we peel it back. So excellent demonstration that the gaps aren't just financial, they're very structurally baked into the system. I think the recommendation for business navigators is really compelling. And here's what I have experienced. Oftentimes, you will have these large staffs, either at banks or you have them like within government, of teams that are focused on entrepreneurship and supporting small businesses, but rarely do those people have the experience of actually running a business. And so they're coming from a very theoretical point of view. And when they're putting these things into action, they are moving slow as molasses. They're asking you for layers and layers of validate because they don't understand the pressure of like making payroll every month. You know, I have 15 days of cash on hand. None of that hits their radar. And so it feels like a huge disconnect. And to the extent that I could recommend have more people with that entrepreneurial real life experience in these roles, I think you would have the ability to shift things faster and more targeted, because there's nothing like having that pain that you've experienced to understand how to solve for it. So questions that I would add for your presentation would be, if you had to prioritize one intervention, because you gave a lot of really good ones, navigators, you know, creating multilingual resources, that like application reform, which one do you think would have the highest impact in the short term? Like, right, so like just prioritize, because there was a lot of good stuff in there. The other question I would have is, how might chambers of commerce or even like trusted community organizations that may not be entrepreneur, but people go to for support, play a stronger role in bringing awareness of these resources? Because oftentimes people find out about things in places you would never imagine, like church. And then the third question, if you considered whether digital platforms like AI chat, WhatsApp groups, they're exploding on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, could they fill information gaps quicker than state systems? Because, as I said earlier, they are moving very slow. So those are three questions that popped up for me for your presentation. It was super well done. I was very inspired. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to move on to the second presentation with Jishan, Immigrant Women Entrepreneurs. For yours, I would say the framing was very clear for me, that the system, and I think you were kind of, the companies you interviewed, it gave me the sense that they were looking for venture. Where is she? Okay. You didn't say they were all looking for venture, but because they were doing the coffee chats and kind of pitching, I assumed that that was the lane they were trying to get into. So I think very clearly outlined how this whole game is really designed for, and I've studied it very deeply, designed for, usually it's male white engineers, right? And they ask you, are you a technical founder or not? And if you're not in that bucket, you start to get discounted, right, for the opportunity. And then you also talked about the policy issues on immigration and visa situations and how that is a huge pain point. And I have found it in my own research with women. Literally, like, I came here for this job, but I'm also an entrepreneur, and I can't really do both because this challenge, right? So I think there's a huge opportunity there. I think the financial modeling on the pain point would be super powerful, meaning what kind of economic opportunity are we not activating, materializing, because these founders are sitting on this opportunity for so long. Like, they have this idea, it's worth X, it could capture this and create these many jobs, but they actually can't because of their immigration situation. So some of the questions I have would be, if you can imagine what recommendations you would make for like a startup visa kind of idea so that you could maximize the entrepreneurial talent in this country from people who are brilliant and want to go do it now, but can't, right? I think there's a huge opportunity there. What role could universities like Cal play in building mentorship first incubators that really focus on this immigrant experience, because they're coming into both venture capital that is a new world, and then they're in this country with this whole, there's like many layers of opportunity for kind of like deep mentorship and advocacy. And then you were talking about performative coffee chats, which I personally hate. How could you reimagine re-engineering the investor founder dynamic so that the investor is getting what they need in terms of really assessing the opportunity and the founder feels respected and valued in the process, right? So those two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. But I loved the fact that you went down this road, because it is, I'll talk about what I do. It's like the heart of what I'm doing. So thank you. All right. So the next one was Lara. And again, women founders. I love. Okay. And I think the focus on women at Cal really struck a personal nerve with me, because I graduated from Cal. I live 10 minutes from here. I'm a founder. And I spend most of my time at a different campus I won't mention, down in the South Bay, because they have such a welcoming entrepreneurial ecosystem. They have a program designed specifically for Latino entrepreneurs. They have a massive network that I get emails, we're hosting this, or yeah, SF Tech, what do you do? Like, they're really wanting me to engage. I never went there. I've never written a check to them, but yet they're super engaged. And so as you were saying this, thinking like there's an opportunity to figure out how we show up differently, given the demographics of the Bay Area, of the campus, and the opportunity we have to drive impact. So I am volunteering to figure that out with you if you want. I already told Cristina, I'm like, oh, I don't have to drive that far. So there's that. And then you were talking about women asking for male co-founders, or like investors telling women, you might want a male co-founder. And I hear this all the time about women having that feedback. And I often say it would be like a marriage of convenience that is very expensive. Because in getting a co-founder, you have to give them equity in your company. They can't just be like, he's on pretend, right? Like, they have to, and it's so expensive and it's unnecessary. And so I just want to acknowledge that pain point is real, and how we get around that is finding values-aligned investors. So I just want to say that your presentation really highlighted the hidden kind of attrition risk when early founders get in there and then they get so disappointed with the system that they kind of stop or stall, or just like go around in circles trying to figure it out. And that risk, to me, I reframe it in my mind as a huge opportunity loss. And I have quantified all of this data, so I'm happy to share it with you. So if this is of interest as you continue your professional endeavors, I think it could be very helpful. I think connecting the dots of the data you had to national studies, like Boston Consulting Group had a study of all the ways in which women founders outperform. Yeah. They exit faster, they're more capital efficient, right? So that kind of data helps your data. Like, it just gives it this deeper validation that we're not just complaining, but like we really perform once we get the capital. Questions would literally be how you would design a women of color founder network at Cal so that it doesn't become like a niche little thing, like, oh, look at those like ladies over there doing their passion projects, but like a real serious entity that rivals what's already exists here. Like, what would you do to build that out? And I would also say, what role should male allies and institutional players, what should their role be in shifting the culture? And just like by saying words, like we support you, but like really, what is the role that they should play? And how do we activate them? And then if you were given seed funding to scale your recommendations, what would be your first pilot intervention? So I'm like now putting you in the seat of the entrepreneur. So thank you, Lara. I think it was fantastic. I really connected deeply with all the findings that you had. And I can tell you that 100% you found very, very real, both pain points and opportunities for women founders.
Thank you.
And then finally, Emily. So I spent most of my, where's Emily? Oh, here. You did a very good job of using data to show visually the fact that there's like pockets of communities that where capital doesn't exist. So we have a lack of debt capital. Then Lara said we have a gap and lack of venture. We have a lack of mentorship. We have a lack of a lot of things, but we have incredible, brilliant minds like you who can go build them. And so I am encouraging the analytical brain and also that entrepreneurial part of you that can be activated to create as well. I think that the link between financial inclusion and civic empowerment is incredibly helpful in this time, because I think people are feeling like they don't have power in an environment that is very aggressive in attacking people who they want to make feel small. And it's not the case. I think we can stand up by having data. We can stand up by flexing our muscle and collaborating in ways that create leverage, because I would not advocate to put people that are the most vulnerable at the front, but they have a lot of power. And in collaboration with those of us who can take more risk, we can make change and we can stop some of these crazy things from happening where, you know, capital is literally being choked off from reaching diverse communities. I would say that there is a program that would be a really good test case for you to just examine, which is the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. They had a commitment to support 10,000 small businesses to scale, but then they started activating those businesses to support the brand, to support and bring forward ideas for policy and other things, and it became a force. And so that same idea of how you activate these businesses and entrepreneurs in ways that can make a difference, I think is a powerful model of what is possible and could be replicated. Questions? I would say if mentorship is as impactful as lending, what scalable funding model could support it? Could it be philanthropy, policy, or a hybrid or something else? But essentially, how would you fund it? Because CDFIs operate on very thin margins and they don't have a lot to do these other things, but they're very important. And then I also had, how might immigrant inclusive civic hubs partner with city governments without risking being politicized? And then how can your recommendations be adapted beyond Los Angeles to other communities that have very similar experiences? So with that, great job. I am just so inspired. I am beyond proud of what you've achieved. And I had said to Cristina earlier that it literally brings me to tears, because when we imagine this, I think we just felt like it was the right thing. We know it could be powerful, but when you see it playing out in real life with each of you, I am so glad that we took the chance and got this done. Thank you so much and best of luck.
So thank you, Jenny, for your thoughtful reflections and excellent questions. And I want to give our students a chance to maybe answer one of the questions that was posed to you. So if you could, all of our students could come forward, and Jenny too, to join this circle. We want to have just a little bit of time for some dialogue. And then we'll see how much time we have left for a question or two from the audience. But I don't know who'd like to start. You don't have to go in the order in which you presented, but those were some really awesome questions. And my guess is that you all have so much more to share than your short 10-minute presentation. So here's an opportunity to answer and share a little bit more about what you're thinking. Yeah.
Okay, I can start. So I just want to say thank you for Also highlighting that we as students can do something as well, because.
Can you speak to the audience?
Yes, sorry. One of the first questions she asked was regarding like, highlighting how we as students can, make change, not just the state. And you mentioned, direct support to the businesses, and I think that is something that we're able to do, or at least do at like a community rooted level. Was there something else?
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that you asked about, if there's one kind of issue we could address head on right now, I think you brought it up about getting business navigators who have the experience in the field, who have that acumen when it comes to navigating these resources. I think that's a very easy fix. When I was interning at GoBiz, we kind of floated that idea around. I think the main issue with that is actually manpower constraint and kind of resource constraints, especially with what's going on right now. But I think in terms of that immediate solution that we could establish for small businesses, definitely getting people on board who have the experience and not just someone that may know how the system works but doesn't have to get their hands dirty. I think getting your hands dirty is super important, especially in the business world. So I think that was kind of the immediate thoughts we had when we thought of if we had to come up with that one solution that was needed right now, but we're getting that business navigator with that prior experience on board for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think in relation to your question about the funding, I was thinking a lot about that too, because CDFIs get their funding from federal money, and a lot of this is being threatened right now with the current administration. And so when I was talking to my participants, they were saying how they were scared of like this money being taken away. And so I was potentially like thinking of potentially passing a bill in like the LA County greater area that you know how you were mentioning about the program about the golden like stack program, and potentially having one specifically for LA, because LA is such like filled with like undocumented people. And so I think if LA were to create its own program, like its own version of CDFI, but specifically with like an emphasis in civic engagement, because I think there's just overall lack of like opportunities to like political spaces, and they felt like because I don't know English, because I'm not a resident, because I'm a person of color, they just felt like they couldn't become civically engaged. So I think many of them, they said that they organized among their communities, but it was because of that mentorship. And I feel like CDFIs don't see that it's such a great opportunity for small business owners to become civically engaged. And I always wonder like about civic engagement, it's like I'm really it's something passionate about me, because like that's how I became engaged. I took a poli-sci class in my senior year, and it radicalized me. So I'm like, how can we radicalize like small business owners to become politically engaged in their communities, not just investing in themselves, but in their communities, And so I think during these critical times, like I agree, they should not be at the forefront, because they're the most vulnerable, but they only know what they need, and they have to vocalize that with the leaders, right? And so if LA County could create its own program, passing a bill or a local like policy, I think that would be such a great opportunity for LA natives or just literally people who are interested in becoming civically engaged to become more political in the communities.
So I would say the two things to that, yes. And the first set of people that need to become radicalized are the leaders of the CDFIs.
Yes.
Because as they begin to grow, just pay attention to this data. They become much more like banks.
Yeah.
And I think
Can you try to speak up there?
I'm just saying that CDFIs themselves, as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they start acting like a bank.
Yeah.
So less risk, underwriting really safe deals, no startup loans. And so if the point is to meet the neediest, we have to have leadership that's willing to say, like, I want to take that issue. I want to help people getting nothing, right? And so that has been a pain point for me. I'm like, hey, I'm like investing in CDFIs. And yet I have customers coming to me saying, we can't get a loan. And they're saying, no, because it's risky, blah, blah, et cetera. Yeah. And I'm like, well, no one's serving them now. Yeah. So there's a balance, right? And we need to have investors who support CDFIs to take more risk, to do these kinds of things. And yet, you need to actually vocalize them at all the levels. It is really important right now.
Yeah.
To take care of our immigrant entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Really important.
I was gonna say in relation to your finding tools, I was thinking a lot about like how there's this lack of awareness to knowing about these resources. A lot of these, and honestly, I was even telling my dad, like, hey, like these like inclusive action gives you a loan of 5K at a 2% interest rate. And they don't check for like a social security number. As long as you have an ITIN and you have like a structure of like your business, like it's like small stuff like that that you only know if you're doing the research. And and I think as everyone here, as like, as a UC Berkeley student, I think everyone here has a role to give back to the community what we're learning here. And so I immediately hop in a call with my dad and be like, hey dad, like there's so many resources out there, and he wouldn't have known if it wasn't for me, And so I got fortunate enough to get close to my participants, but I think it's such a great way for like undocumented people to like, a lot of them don't have the opportunity to work because they don't have work authorization, and a lot of them, so they had to go to different areas like opening their small businesses, and so, but that is the end goal for my parents, and I'm glad that we have resources like this, but it's not like aware, like you guys were saying, like how can we systematically like give this to the community? Like a lot of my participants found because of word of mouth, because like, hey, I'm in a program, like can you do it? But it wasn't because like they found a poster of fire or something like that. It was because it was a word of mouth.
I would just say Rudy, who runs Inclusive Action, is the best.
Oh,
he is down, and goes into giving. He's so wonderful, and that should manifest in everything that the organization does, including how they structure these programs.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you found them.
Yeah, I think what Emily was saying, I think kind of the main barrier, especially that kind of goes unaddressed when it comes to navigating these resources, would actually be skepticism. I feel as things change over time, especially on the federal and the state level, I think that when it comes to navigating and actually being receptive to these resources, I do believe that there's an air of skepticism, especially when I've interacted with these business owners. They don't necessarily, some of them are aware of these resources. I wouldn't say they're very well versed in it. I think where the other issue comes is that it's almost like a too good to be true kind of situation where, low interest rates, kind of no strings attached, you don't need a social security number. Marketing that to an immigrant small business owner who's already faced a lot of challenges seems like a skeptical kind of, proposal to them. So I think, maybe even kind of equipping these navigators or equipping people on the state level, on the CDFIs, to actually kind of give them the reassurance that, hey, these resources are available, no strings attached. It's do what you need to do. We will support you. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is, where you come from, whatever kind of barriers you may face. I think that's something that kind of goes overlooked when it comes to discussing access to capital, because I think it's always on the technical side of things, not very much on the social, interpersonal side of things. I think that's a barrier that would be an interesting place to start looking at as well. So,
yeah, no, it's absolutely, trust is everything.
Oh yeah, especially in banking.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to give Lara and Jishan a chance to also answer your question.
I can go ahead and think about like how we can do at a university level to leverage like better incubators that's like education first and like empowering actual foreign-born women entrepreneurs. Actually, this issue was brought up to me by one of my interviewees who is a Berkeley student on an F1 visa, an international student. She's also the one who brought up like coffee chats are too performative. I think one thing she mentioned to me is in all of the boot camps she attended, especially in Haas, all the instructors are male, mostly white male, and mostly looking for projects that's AI centered and empowered by like engineering technologies. She's doing a more public centric program. She's focused on like public impact. She wanted to help international students to get better access to globalized education. That's like her goal. It's very meaningful, it's very impactful. However, she doesn't have as much access and opportunities. And when she mentioned like coffee chats, she found it's really difficult for her to pretend something is super chill. It's just we talk over coffee while we're actually discussing the future of like her company. She cannot do that. She found it really hard to like navigate through such performativity. Like she wanted to sit down, put a slide deck, talk about her future, talk about the company's future, talk about the kids that she really wanted to help. So I think for her, rather than a coffee chat, a serious meeting might be something that's like more helpful, because she didn't want to perform as like, oh, I'm just going with the vibe, I'm chill. She she said, like, she literally said, I'm not chill, because I'm serious about it. It's not my passion project. It's about my future.
So I forgot to tell everybody what I'm working on because I got so excited about your stuff, but to address this thing, I am working on creating a tool that will help women navigate through AI. And it's like, literally when you get onto the platform, it asks you what kind of company you're building, what stage you're at, have you raised, and if you want to raise, what's your target, like just baseline. And then it will start to say, have you pitched? Do you have a deck? Upload it. And if not, like, we're going to help women understand the lingo. Because people start saying, you know, what's your flywheel effect in your model? And I'm like, what? Just all the ways in which this whole thing works. And you may not understand that language just so that you understand it. Then best practices in pitching and what questions you can expect given what you're pitching. And like start practicing answers so that you're prepared. And some of these ridiculous ones about, do you have kids and what does your husband think of, really? So we're preparing women to just be ready to answer them, not head on, because I would never answer that question. Does your husband think? Like, well, here's my business. Yeah, I'm going to pivot it away from that. Doesn't matter. Like, not important to the success of my business. I've been successful in so many other ways. My husband, who cares what he thinks, frankly. And so it literally is designed with a ton of founders who are building today and taking all this experience, lived experience, and like repackaging it so that women can access it easy and not be like, what does that mean? Did this investor say this to you? How did you answer that? And so it's like a very trusted platform where we can be together and like learning quickly. And then I'm bringing on venture capitalists who want to fund women who are serious, and I'm due diligencing deals and passing them through so they can fund them fast. I don't want you doing all the dance and coffee chats. No, here's the deal. It's tight. These women are incredibly brilliant and they're open to taking these deals. And so we're testing it and it's exciting. And then the other thing I'm doing is building a whole blockchain protocol to be able to build transparency into a system that's super opaque. And it's incredibly exciting to bring in investors who you might not have $1 million, but you might have $1,000. You wanted to jump in and support women and others. We're building that whole infrastructure. So it is really exciting. It like literally connects to all that you're saying. And so to support you in this thinking, like I am sharing that so that if you want to keep chatting with me, I'd be happy to. But it's time for incredible innovation in the space. And for those of us who can see these opportunities, like there's all thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of women who are ready to go do something big and they can't. And so we are going to invest in them to the extent that we can find them, reach them and help other venture investors find them as well. And so it's my contribution to the field because I'm so sick and tired of like figuring out one by one. I'm like, no, let's scale these solutions. So thank you for what you're sharing. Okay, Lara.
You mentioned a lot of great points, and one of them that stood out to me in relation to the issue is how can we create a space that's inclusive and make sure that men are allies in the space when it comes to women of color entrepreneurs and pursuing entrepreneurship. And one thing that comes to mind immediately is don't underestimate women of color. We oftentimes go through so many experiences, but this has led us to be so resilient. 90% of startups fail, and so key indicator that a startup will be successful is resilience. And resilience isn't something that you can just take a course on, it's built over time. And so I can speak from various experiences and from my interviewees' experiences that because of what they've gone through, they're despite what you might think, they're not feeling down about their startup. Do they wish that certain opportunities existed and were different? Yes. But they said that what they've gone through and their experiences has allowed them to keep going in the sense that they know that they might not get there right away, but they'll eventually get there. And that being at UC Berkeley is something that they work towards, as I believe all three of my participants were first generation. So breaking down these barriers and resilience is so important. And I think this goes for everyone, not just women. Don't underestimate
whoever it is that you're working with. Respect is so important. Communication, ongoing communication, and collaboration is so important for any space. So to answer your question, it would be the first thing I would say is like take space, make space, and also respect people and don't underestimate them because everyone is so unique. And like I mentioned, particularly women of color have so much experience dealing with challenges and pivoting, which are all skills that you needed within the startup space. So collaborate with them because when they are given a small amount of money, research shows that they not only double it, they triple it. So don't be in competition, but work together because if we really do want successful innovation, women do need to be prioritized within the space.
I think that's a great place to close our conversation. And I want to just thank our incredible student presenters for your research and the heart that you brought to this work. It really shows, and just so privileged to work with you. I want to thank Jenny for your thoughtful reflections and provocative questions and partnership as always. And I want to thank our audience. We have a delicious lunch prepared. Please stay. And if you had a question for one of our students, now is your chance to talk over lunch. We'll reconvene in about a half an hour for our next panel. And thank you all.